All right, it's time to talk with our featured guest, Dr. Mike Neal. Mike, how's it going?
I'm doing fantastic. How about you, Mike?
I'm doing pretty good. Thanks for asking. Now, can you kick things off by telling us a bit about your practice, but your business? Who are you serving, and what are some of the unique things you're doing for your clients?
You bet. I'm a practicing optometrist. So, what the heck is a practicing optometrist doing on a dental podcast? I don't think I'm the only one asking that question right now. Years ago, I started a company called Build My Team. And the concept of Build My Team was to figure out a much more long-term solution for hiring team members in our practice. And that scaled into a whole company. We're now in a little over 40 states in the United States plus Canada. And the whole concept of the company is to find people who have natural talents and strengths for the position that you're hiring them for, not based on resumes, but their natural talents and strengths. And what ends up happening when those folks get into those positions is they become very quickly incredible team members. They show up for work each day doing what they're naturally gifted at. And we built a system that not only finds them, but puts them into your practice, and it's all done as a service, software as a service type model, where we do it with almost no work on your side. You can hire a person in dentistry for an unlicensed position with about an hour's worth of work.
Wow.
How's
Okay.
that for crazy?
That is pretty crazy. Yeah. So this has been up and running for 10 years, you said?
Since 2018.
Oh, 2018. Okay. Gotcha. So where did
Yeah.
this solution come? What was the pain point you were experiencing?
Oh, great question. In our practice, we were hiring the wrong way. We kept hiring based upon resumes, and we kept getting the same results over and over again, which were just hit or miss all over the place. We found out early on that people do not apply in most private practices with much in the way of experience. And there's no way to tell from a resume what they're good at or not. And even when they do have experience, our field research shows that's just as often a red flag as it is good news. And so we created, over the course of several years, this was prior to 2018, we created an entire process where our team will write the job description for a practice and for the particular position. Then our software publishes these job descriptions out to over 20 job boards, gets as many applicants as possible into the process of hiring. And as soon as they apply on one of these job boards, within 5 seconds, their cell phone bings. And it's a text from the practice through Build My Team, of course, asking them to start the assessment process. And these assessments are what determines what the person's natural strengths and talents are. It's very quick, very concise, and it's also different for each position. So somebody who might apply for a front desk position may not make an excellent biller, might not make an excellent treatment coordinator, that type of thing. When they apply, they go through our assessment process. We determine which position they'd be best at if you have multiple positions. Then, once they're all done, and by the way, we reject about 97% of applicants, believe it or not.
Wow.
We do this in the exact opposite of how most folks hire. And when they're all done our assessment process, then what we do is we run them through a video interview. And that's all done from the time that we write that job description through to the end result, the finalist candidates. All that's done 24/7. From there, we send the finalist candidates over to the practice, and the practice gets to select. So you didn't have to do any work along the way.
That's interesting. So then rewind a little bit. You mentioned hiring the wrong way and people hit or miss all over the place. Can you give me some bad principles that are common that you've seen when it comes to hiring the wrong way?
Hiring based on resumes. That's the real crux of the problem, because a resume doesn't tell you what somebody's good at. It is simply an inflated, glorified, most of the time nowadays, highly fictional source of information, more or less about the candidate. That's unfortunately a real life description of how most resumes are. For example, you can't most times ask for references. You can't talk to the previous boss. Hey, what were they really like? Everybody's so afraid of litigation nowadays that doesn't work. So you're relying upon the candidate themselves to represent themselves in what for most of them is a bit of a life or death situation. If they don't get that job or a job, they're going to starve or go hungry or otherwise. Their goals are not aligned with yours. Their goals are to represent themselves as glowingly as possible to get a job. Consequences be damned. And with our approach, you can't do that. There's no right or wrong on the approach that we use. What we're drilling down into is what they're actually and naturally good at. And so hiring wrong for most people is the resume approach, the interview approach. And what I mean by the interview approach, let's say the dentist themselves is doing it. When was the last time you brought in a bunch of people in for an interview that weren't intimidated by a doctor? You really think you're getting that exact true person they're going to be at work? Of course not. It doesn't represent what the person is actually good at. And that's why there is so much turnover with this type of approach. You just don't know if you're trying to put a round peg into a square hole on any given day doing these interviews. With our approach, you do.
So when you mention your approach, can you kind of break it down? What does that look like?
Yeah, that's the starting out with rewriting the job description, then going through the candidates, all go through the assessment process or they exit the process. We determine their natural strengths and talents based upon our approach. And what this results in, and this is kind of a big picture, 50,000 foot view. If you think in terms of your own practice, maybe you're stuck, maybe your team isn't too happy. What I would ask your listeners to do is think in terms of who are the great team members. And what we like to talk about are the A players, B players, and C players. I've said this a million times. A players only want to work with A players. They will do 3-4 times more work than other people on your team. And without them, you think your practice is going to fall apart. A players will tolerate B players, but they will quit and leave their job because of C players. They do not want people on the team that can't tow their own weight. What ends up happening is you need to take a look at your team, take a look at the C players. Just because they're performing poorly doesn't mean they're a bad person. They're just in the wrong role. Sometimes you can switch roles on your team for them. I've done that in my own practice. I had a person who almost got fired. We created a position for her that concentrated solely on her strengths. And I'm telling you, she is perfect. She's absolutely perfect for that position. She's been with us over 10 years now because of that. You have to take a look at these A player, B player, C player roles. And what Build My Team does is we focus on getting A players, B plus players, and that's it. You're not going to get less than that out of our process because the people have natural strengths and talents for the role that they're asked to do.
Gotcha. Okay. I like that. So then when it comes to this, I guess the assessment process that you mentioned, if we were to break it down for the front office, let's just use that analogy right now because that's kind of common in our industry. When it comes to the front office, trying to find someone who can stick there, who's good, how would that job description kind of look?
Yeah, there's some secret sauce behind that, but I can't answer that question directly. And here's why. Depends on your practice. So our process starts with the practice owner calling Build My Team, setting up a consultation call. It's free, of course. What our team is going to do is to drill down into all of the particulars about your practice. Is it a high volume practice, a slower practice, concierge? Is it high end? Is it more routine, rural, city? There's a multitude of factors. And then when all of those questions are answered, what our team's also going to do is start to ask you about some skeletons in the closet. What are the real problems you're having with your team? And we're going to ask you again, and we're going to drill down into what those exact problems are. Because when we know as accurately as possible what's going on in your practice, well, guess what? We can bring people in who are, I can handle that type people versus folks that you bring in and they last 2 weeks and off they go. A 2-week type hire costs you $4,000 to $5,000 at an absolute minimum. And that's what we want to make sure we absolutely avoid. It's to the point where we guarantee all of this. We guarantee all of our placements for 90 days. It's very straightforward because of the great fit that we have with each position.
Gotcha. Okay, that's nice. Does Build My Team also handle staffing issues, mainly like challenges that we're watching in our practice?
We do in the consultation with the practice. So once we understand what's actually going on in the practice, our team members can make some suggestions as to where you might want to put your focus, that type of thing. Because remember, they do this all day long. If a dental practice maybe hires 5-6 people a year, just throwing out a number, our team members will have done that in the course of sometimes by lunch, sometimes by the end of the day. That's all they do. You know, we're a company that does one thing over and over again, but we do it exceptionally well. And that's find team members for healthcare practices, not just dental.
So what about the issue where we just have a hard time getting people to apply?
Yeah, that's the thing. We built this company to cast the widest possible net. And we have to do that because we're rejecting so many people. So we're not just publishing to one job board, we're publishing to over 20 of them, all the majors, a whole bunch of minors, some industry specific stuff, etc. Then these job descriptions are designed to get as many applicants as possible, of course. The other things we're doing, they might seem small, but they're now huge in the post-COVID area. Our software is running 24/7. People apply all the time at 3 in the morning. I don't know what they're doing at 3 in the morning, but they're applying for jobs. I don't know what they did before. I don't know what they're doing after, hopefully getting a little bit of sleep. But we see this because we get the time of the applications, etc. We have people doing their video interviews in the middle of the night. We have all kinds of stuff going on. And that's something your practice can't do. You can't compete with that because none of your team members are working around the clock. So for Build My Team, we make your practice more competitive because your practice is hiring 24/7 and going through these processes 24/7, whereas the other dental practice down the road, the eye care practice, the chiropractor, they're not. You say, well, what the heck does that have to do with my dental practice? I got news for you. The people who are applying in a chiropractic are applying in a dental practice, in a regular medical practice. They want a healthcare job. They're not in love with teeth or eyes or backs. They're looking for a healthcare job. The successful ones, they want to help people. They want to work in an air-conditioned office, sit in front of a computer most days instead of digging holes or working at a deli counter, having people throw their sandwiches back at them. By the way, true story. All of these types of things, that's what they're looking for. And so the key to getting these tons of applicants is to approach the process differently. If you're doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result, we know that's the definition of insanity. And it's driving dentists and people in the dental profession absolutely crazy. I hear this all the time. You have to do it differently. And that's what the Build My Team system brings to the table.
I like that. I like that a lot. Man, 3 a.m. in the morning. And do you think that's because like people are at that time, they're like, I don't want to go up to work tomorrow, right? And then they're just wake up and they're applying?
Absolutely. That happens all the time. Also, a lot of single moms. Maybe the kids are awake. Maybe something's going on. Maybe they can't sleep because they don't like their job. They're trying to figure out a way out, figure out a way to better their family. The people that you're hiring successfully, especially the people that Build My Team brings to the table, these are real people. They are achievers. They're go-getters. They want to better their lives. These are not C players. We do not bring C players to the table. And unfortunately, I will tell you after years and years of interviewing and bringing people into our practice, you can't tell if they're an A player, B player, or C player from a resume. That's where the assessment process comes in and the natural strengths and talents, the fit to the position. If they are a terrific fit to the position and they're an A player, look out. With the right leadership in your practice, they'll do wonders. I'll give you an example. In our practice, we used to have 14 people staffing the practice total. That was our team size. Our revenue, gross revenue, went up by over 50%, and our net income just a little bit less than 3 times, 300% net income by dropping our team members to 10 and a half, 50% gross, almost 3 times the net income by reducing the team by almost 4 people. There's somebody in eye care who his listeners didn't believe it, and I got on a separate Zoom and showed him tax returns. I'm not pulling this out of thin air or another place. The reason it worked like that and the reason it gelled, first of all, when the team really got rocking and rolling, we started profit sharing. Now, my goals are aligned with the team's goals. And it's not short-term profit sharing. It's not ripping off patients, God forbid, nothing like that. All based upon the long-term success of our practice. And how are we successful? We take amazing care of people. Sound familiar to dentists out there? Of course. You take amazing care of people in healthcare. A ton of things work out on their own. The other things we did is we removed the C players from the team. Great people, they just were in the wrong job. They were removed from the team, replaced by A players. And we noticed that productivity went up so much that we were able to not have to fulfill another basically 3.5 positions. And we still did vastly better, not only in net income, but gross, as I said, a little over 50% higher than at the time. And that's all because of the team. It's not because I'm working more and I practice with my wife. It's not because she's working more. In fact, the shocker is we're working less. We actually work less doctor hours than we did before all of this. Why? Because the team is doing the vast majority of the work. They do almost everything, up to the point a little shy of what licensing allows. We still do some stuff that could be outsourced to the team, but not very much at all, almost none. That's the transformation. It all started because of a mindset shift. Why are other practices able to do this? Why can't my practice do this? What's wrong with me? What was wrong with me in particular, I needed to shift my mindset. I needed to get out of the traditional way of trying to solve this problem of finding great team members. And when I got out of it, it didn't happen immediately. It took 18, 20 months for the numbers that I told you about to happen. But that's what happened. And instead of going to work pulling my hair out, if you're watching on video, you can see that happened. Instead of that, what happens now is I'm excited to go to work. We joke around all the time with the team members. We used to have two people. One was trying to scare the other and spook the other, walking around the practice. So every once in a while, you'd hear these like shouts because she got her. Just goofy stuff like that. It's a great work environment now. And that's all because of the changes that we made.
And these changes, let me ask, you mentioned this a couple of times. Yeah. How have algorithms and analytic tools shaped your staffing decisions, and what measurable impacts have they had so far?
I'll give you an example. With our software, the first thing that it measures is the applicant's mindset. We're measuring their healthcare mindset. If you have one, great, you move on in our process. If you don't, you gently exit the process. We want people who want to help you and serve your patients. Sounds pretty straightforward, right? The vast majority of people who apply in a healthcare position, they have no interest in that. And that's one of the core reasons why they wash out. The next thing we measure is their speed of learning. From a speed of learning standpoint, we want people who learn pretty quickly, but not too quickly, and they have to learn fast enough. If they don't fit that sweet spot, if they're too smart, they leave your practice. If they're not smart enough, then you're having repetitive conversations with them about training for eternity. They just never get it. Okay, so there's a sweet spot for that. If they pass that, they move on. Then we're measuring all kinds of other things like, are they warm and friendly with patients? Do they follow procedures and policies constantly? Can they handle details and paperwork? What about routine? Dentistry does a lot of the same thing over and over again. If they get bored by extended routine, that's tough. But there are positions within a dental practice that have less routine than others. So it all depends on the right fit for the position. We're also taking a look at two things in particular that are wonderful. One is their ability to follow up. When you're talking to your assistant in the operatory and you tell the assistant something, at the end of the day, do you go back to them and say, do you ask them, did you finish that? My answer in my practice is absolutely not. They should have sweat beads on their forehead if they don't finish their tasks. I want them to be 10 times more anxious than I'll ever be if they're not following through, because it's required. This is what we do to earn a living. And if you don't do that, you get into all kinds of trouble. So another thing we measure is whether or not they can handle stress. Seems simple, right? And this is measurable. If they can handle stress, terrific. You can work at the front desk. You can't handle stress, you're going to wash out in 7 to 10 days. You'll be gone. If you're doing collections per se, that's a stressful. You can see very quickly all kinds of positions in the practice have different requirements for that type of thing. And so we make sure that we measure, because there are some very stringent components to this algorithm where if they aren't met, the person will not stay in their role. And the flip side of that is, because Build My Team is so meticulous about this, the team members tend to stay for a very long time. Our team members will outlast the resume process team members by a country mile.
So then how do you measure stress?
Through our assessments. These are psychometric assessments. Mm-hmm. We're not asking a question, do you handle can you handle stress? Of course not. Nothing like that. There's ways to ask those types of questions and get those responses, and none of them are direct. We're also asking things that are pretty straightforward too, and this is software based. So I'll give you an example. Think of the time savings of this. So for every single applicant, we're going to ask 10 what we call knockout questions. So for example, our office is typically open on the following days. We list the dates and the times. Are there any days or times that you're unable to work? Simple question, right? When was the last time in an interview you asked that question? Did you ask it up front, or did you ask it at the very end? What our software will do is it's going to hit that stuff very early on in the process. And here's why. If you are a good candidate and you're needed for a full-time position and you're really doing your best and you can work Tuesday and Thursday from 10 to 2 with a 2-hour lunch, is that going to work out for the practice? Of course not. You're working 4 hours a week. Now, it sounds ridiculous, but I'm telling you, we've heard worse. Things like that, where now the practice doesn't waste any time whatsoever on the candidate. They exit our process. We're also asking for things like, how many years are you planning to reside in the area? Or do you have any prior experience in the field? Of course, we want to know that. What's your commute time in minutes from your current residence to the practice location? Why is that important? Well, in a rural area, You might have a half an hour commute time. No big deal. You got to drive 30 minutes to get everywhere. You going to drive 30 minutes to get to a practice in Manhattan? Of course not. You'll drive past 100 dental practices every time you get in that car or take the subway. You're thinking, will they pay me 25 cents an hour or more? It won't last. And so we're stacking the deck for our clients to have these team members come in, do a terrific job because it's based on the natural strengths and talents. And then also stacking the deck because we're making sure that all of the showstoppers are essentially taken care of with these candidates before they're even sent over to the practice to meet.
You also mentioned something where you look for their sweet spot. What's too smart?
There's 6 steps to that. Imagine a protractor. On the left-hand side, you've got people where, oh boy, it's going to be a challenge. We all have patients like that. Hopefully nobody has anybody working in their practice like that. But imagine you're trying to educate the patient about dental procedure X. How many times you have to tell them the same thing? They come back, you're telling them the same thing. There's no retention. They're not capable of processing that. They might be a wonderful person, but healthcare requires a constant barrage of information. Things are always changing in dentistry. They're always changing, not only from the clinical standpoint, from the treatment standpoint, but also from the billing standpoint. But the point is, it's never static. You can't learn this job and master it without the ability to continue to learn and change. That's how that is. On the other side, if they're too smart, they're just going to leave. They're not challenged by your practice. They'll stay there for a couple of months and off they go. We're looking for people in a sweet spot that are definitely above average intelligence, learn very quickly, but are also challenged by the practice and what it represents.
Gotcha. Okay. And I know we mentioned questions and things we can utilize right now, but specifically when it comes to a practice, is there anything that you have in mind that can be like an innovative strategy that you found most effective in recruiting staff, especially in a competitive market? Like, let's just say this person's always getting my applicants and feel like I'm not.
First of all, the shameless plug is to work with Build My Team because we built a system to do what you can't. And it's exceptionally effective at doing one thing over and over. If you aren't working with Build My Team, 2 things. I would immediately stop emailing people. I would only text. In fact, early on in Build My Team, we built an email system that had to be stopped and replaced. It took over 6 months to do this, to completely replace our email system with texting, because virtually all the candidates said they used email and checked it 2 to 3 times a week. It was gridlock, absolute gridlock for practices. Instead, with texting, try and find a candidate who doesn't check their phone within a couple of minutes when you send a text, right? Everybody does nowadays. So by texting directly, what we do is we cut the communication time. Now you can actively make decisions. And that leads into the next point. The thing that you can do today is immediately, as fast as possible, make decisions. A players want to work with A players, as I said. And if you're going to take a couple days or, God forbid, a week, they're long gone. If you take that long to get back to them, they will not be around. Who will be around? The C players, because they have no other place to go. And so that is a forcing function that all you have to do is start making immediate decisions. So for example, as I said, Build My Team does the hiring for our practice. When Build My Team sends a candidate over, our practice manager, within an hour or 2, like, it's basically almost stop what you're doing and contact the candidate. So we try and get the candidate in. Let's say they come over in the morning from Build My Team. We try and get them in that day for an interview. It's always offered. And why? Because we're decisive. Sometimes we're not, but we want to appear decisive to the candidates so that we're not turning away any A players because we can't make our mind up. So that's something that a practice can do immediately. And then when they come in for an interview, you make your decisions. So what we have done with our practice is we'll offer people the position on the spot, pending a background check. Now, we pay for background checks in the practice. We're mainly looking for financial issues with the background checks. There's some other stuff too that I won't go through in detail, but I don't want anybody in our practice who's had embezzlement or fraud or any types of charges like that. We want nothing to do with that. And we don't have to, because there's this solid pipeline of talent coming into our practice. So not only do we get to pick the A players, but we get to pick the A players who haven't gotten into some type of financial or law enforcement problem in the past.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. I like that. The texting thing.
Using an example, let's say you've got Build My Team sends over 3 people. If you are expecting to call them and email them, those 3 people, I'll bet you if you're lucky, one gets back to you. Now,
Mm.
what happens if you text all three of them? Okay. In fact, this is so critical that the Build My Team agreement with our clients requires that you reach back out to those candidates when we send the candidates to our clients. You have to reach out to them within 48 hours, or else we consider the position filled. Speed nowadays is critical. And if a practice isn't doing that, those folks are gone.
Yeah, especially A players, like you mentioned.
The saying used to be fire quickly and hire slowly. There was some merit to that proverbially back in the day. Now, absolutely not. You will never, ever staff your practice properly if you do that. Again, remember, in the dental profession, we're not only competing with other dentists, we're also competing with all kinds of people who run healthcare practices.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay. So then when it comes to once you have your team already,
Mhm.
everybody's kind of looking good. Some people, maybe like you said, there's some B players. What specific culture initiatives or processes have you found most effective in retaining top talent when it comes to this?
So, first of all, goal alignment is critical. You make sure that everybody is on the bus. I'll use that metaphor here. Build My Team gets the right people on the bus. The next step is to get them in the right seats on the bus. And this blew me away early on in our practice. Almost exactly 50% of the people who applied for a job in our practice ended up getting a different job within the practice. Think about that for a second. It's a coin toss. If we have two positions open, you apply for one, there's a 50-50 shot. My team moves you into another position. That's how incredibly poorly a candidate understands their own strengths and talents. It's a 50-50 shot that they're moved to another position that's a better fit for them. For example, we have what's called an insight report that's sent over to the practice, and that's the report of all this information about the candidate. The one that I'm looking at right now, she applied for a different position in our practice. Right now, she's running our front desk in patient care as we speak at the time we're recording this. Her natural strengths and talents, she thought they were best applied to the job A. They weren't. They're best applied to job B. And she's fantastic at the role. Absolutely fantastic at the role. Whereas the other one, nope, wouldn't have been. So that alone, a coin toss as to whether or not a person would be great at each of those roles, it gives you an example of how disconnected an average candidate is with what they're actually good at. And I would argue, based upon what we've seen in the field, is that the younger they are, the more that's the case.
So can this change then, Mike? And if so, how often should we be doing this assessment and evaluation?
The assessments that we do at Build My Team, they're available on your existing team as well. That's an additional service that can be provided. So, got to take a look at each of the team members on your bus, make sure they're in the right seats on the bus, meaning that their natural strengths and talents, if they're a mismatch for the position they're in, don't fire them. Take a solid look and see if you could move them internally in the practice. As I said earlier in the discussion, we did that with such success for one of our team members that she's literally perfect at her current position. So once you move them around into the right seats, then the next thing is this is where the leadership comes in. Somebody's got to tell them how to drive the bus. That's where the owner comes in. So the owner needs to draw them a map or to give them a destination at least. And then you tell them to drive the bus as fast as they can. But there's a but to this. You want to put guardrails on. So the guardrails are telling them what's acceptable, what's not. Like, for example, in our practice, the main one is everything is always done in the best interest of the patient, the best long-term interest of the patient. So by having that as kind of our North Star, it eliminates a ton of problems. We're not looking to have cavalier team members try and get patients to do treatment X or treatment Y. No, no, no. If everything's done in the long-term best interest of the patient, then the practice itself will continue to thrive long-term. That's kind of the map that we've drawn. And now the team is in charge of driving the bus as fast as they can. My role is to provide them the resources that they need to do that. The A players want to be left alone. You micromanage them, they're gone. They are anaphylactically allergic to that. So they're out the door. And an EpiPen's not going to save them.
No, it's true. I like that. I like the autonomy. Have you ever seen this scenario, Mike, where an owner or a leader, they may have the wrong strengths? They decided to open up their own practice. They're like, I'm doing this. Cool. As you're talking to them, you're like, this is not for you, man. Like practicing, maybe it should have been associateship, getting that paycheck and just being a partner in a practice. Has that ever happened?
All the time. Because when we get into professional school, the dental school, as part of the entire process, nobody's going to be interviewing you as if you're going to Wharton Business School or anything like that. It's not like that. It's not part of the equation. It's whether or not you're going to be a great dentist. Now, if you have a business flair to you or enjoy it, that's one thing. But in that particular case, what Build My Team would do would be to heavily suggest that we're looking at an outstanding practice manager or even a business manager. So, for example, on the business management side of things, that's different than a practice manager. And let's say you have a couple practices, couple locations. So a business manager is going to look at this at a different level. You would have somebody on the ground, like a site manager for each location, and then somebody who's basically running the show, who's looking, not involved in any way, shape, or form in patient care. Somebody's going to be looking at spreadsheets and going into these practices and making sure everybody's nice and happy and productive.
Gotcha. Okay.
That's one way of approaching it.
So could you share what are some of the key things someone should do in this regard, right? Like we're hiring the office manager, hiring a business manager to take over and things like that. How do we know we just didn't hit like a lull in the season and we're just like, we're not making anything. It's hard to find staff. I hate doing this compared to this is really who we are.
That's a challenging question. First thing that comes to my mind is the practice owner could go through the assessment process as well. Most people are concerned that they're going to appear dumb. That's ridiculous. You're a dentist. You're not dumb. You're a smart person. You're in the top 1% of humanity if you're making it through dental school. And that can be done as well. So we can show dentists, a practice owner, what their strengths and talents are. And sometimes it's just calling attention to that. What we always think, and boy, was I ever guilty of this early on in my career, that as a doctor, you have to be an expert at everything. I've got news for you. As doctors, it's the other way around. We're terrible at most things, and we are exceptional at a handful of things. Absolutely exceptional. That's why we're doctors in healthcare. As a dentist, you might be good at a whole bunch of things in dentistry. You might be good at some things outside, but you're not an expert on everything. You are not an HR expert. You're not an expert on hiring. You're not an expert on all that stuff, but you are mind-blowingly good at dentistry. So that's where you should be focusing your time. Be the person who's mind-blowingly good as a dentist, the treatments, all of the different surgeries, etc. That's where you should be spending your time, and bringing in somebody who, or in our case with Build My Team, a company that is mind-blowingly good at solving this one particular problem for you. It's inexpensive, and relative to the time you're spending, it costs nothing. It's peanuts. That's what I would say to that dentist. If you're not competent at what you're doing, you need to bring somebody in who's competent at doing it. And that's a really tough thing to hear. I wonder how many people just tuned out listening to this. It's tough to hear, but I don't know any other way to do it, because you want to bring A players into your team. Well, remember, those A players are going to leave because of C players. And if you as the owner are a C player on part of the team for a role that you play, that's going to be upsetting to them. And it has to be met where it's at. You have to take a look at that and think, okay, yep, I'm no good at this. Got to find somebody who is, and just delegate that particular role or whatever it is, or workflow to the team members that are great at it.
Takes a lot of humility then.
That's where the magic happens.
Yeah, in order to make it happen. So then what practical advice would you give to practice owners struggling to find the right staff right now?
It sounds self-serving, but I would suggest having a discussion with Build My Team, because we have an entire system and layers of 24/7 processes that are built to solve that problem for your practice. That's all they do. So either run out and try and recreate the wheel, or schedule a consultation call with Build My Team. If you can't do that for any reason, then try and make the best decisions you can, but move very, very quickly. You have to be decisive. And if you find somebody on your team who's not doing it, very quickly try and get them into the right role. And if that's not the case, then you have to let them go.
Can I ask you, Mike, you as a business owner and also like optometrist, practice owner, very successful, how do you weigh out your decisions?
I don't. I'm not doing it. But that is a fascinating question. Nobody's asked me that before. So my answer is not one to be glib or cavalier. I'm not making those decisions. I'm not an expert on the day-to-day intricacies of these algorithms. I have team members who do this. I'm practicing what I preach. So we have manuals, we have systems and processes documented, all those types of things. But I rely upon my team members to fill those positions with people that are appropriate for the position. I don't have anything to do whatsoever on a day-to-day basis for hiring in my practice. Absolutely zero. And why would I? Because I've got people who are absolutely phenomenal at doing exactly that.
They know what they're doing. Interesting. Awesome, Mike. So thank you so much for being with us. It's been a pleasure. But before we say goodbye, can you tell our listeners where they can find you?
Sure. Very easy. Buildmyteam.com. And you simply schedule a consultation call at your convenience. That's where it all starts. The message I want to get here is you're not alone as a practice owner. It feels so lonely most days that you've got the weight of the world on your shoulders. You've got all of these problems and they never go away. And you're having trouble sleeping and you're bringing it home. Your kids are upset. You're missing soccer games. Entirely affordable to stop that from happening. Just asking you to switch your mindset a little bit, think about it a little differently, as it says on the screen. Give us a call.
Awesome. So that's going to be in the show notes below. And Mike, thank you so much for being with us. It's been a pleasure, and we'll hear from you soon.
Thank you so much, Mike.